Which wide receivers should be in or out of your lineup for week 10 of the fantasy season? Once again, we'll go through every single matchup of the NFL slate and tell you which wide receivers we like. Now, it's going to be a tricky week because we have 4 teams on bye. We're talking about the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Rams. There are still a few receivers that you don't have to worry about the must starts at wide receiver for week 10. Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Keenan Allen. We'll start with the Thursday night matchup between Carolina and Chicago. But first, let me remind you that this is the perfect time to sign up for Underdog Fantasy if you haven't yet, because you can take advantage of the new customer special, Bryce Young going over 0.5 total yards on Thursday. That's right. You take that pick 'em, you go higher, and if Bryce Young gets 1 yard, you win that pick. You can combine it with any other pick to win 3 times your wager. Check out Underdog Fantasy now because you also get a 100% deposit match if you use promo code ENDGAME. All right, so that Thursday night matchup, we got the Panthers and the Bears. Number 1 in Carolina is still Adam Thielen. That's Bryce Young's safety blanket. Do you feel like that's going to change for any reason?
I mean, we did see a lot more guys get involved last week, and we saw his target share drop. And this is not the same Bears defense we saw earlier in the year. This defense has gotten a lot better. The secondary is a lot better. But I still think for the most part, Adam Thielen is still a good start this week.
Yeah, we're seeing that ceiling lower a little bit for Adam Thielen, but still a pretty solid floor in PPR leagues. And even though Jalen Johnson at Chicago, he stayed there, and he's the top-rated cornerback in PFF among all cornerbacks. That's a tough assignment, but Thielen plays in the slot. He's not going to be shadowed by Johnson, so he is still a pretty solid start. Jonathan Mingo, on the other hand, I will say I felt like he could do something last week, and he really didn't. I don't feel like he can do much, not to help my fantasy team this week.
No, cannot start Jonathan Mingo.
And then here's a question. DJ Moore, what do we do with him? Because not only has he not been great the last couple of weeks, but he hasn't had Justin Fields. But what if Justin Fields does play in week 10?
Yeah, if Justin Fields actually plays, I think DJ Moore is startable. I still won't put him as like a good start or anything because we don't know what we're going to get from Justin Fields, but he's at least startable. If it's Tyson Bagent again, I'm not starting DJ Moore.
Yeah, I think we've seen enough here. Even Cole Kmet having huge games while DJ Moore kind of does nothing. So even with Fields, like you said, it's risky. Is his hand going to be 100%? Is he going to be accurate? Startable, but risky, only with Fields. Then we're going to have another game in Germany. It's the Colts and the Patriots this week. So let's start with Michael Pittman, the number 1 receiver there in Indy. How do you feel about him?
I mean, pretty much the same way I always feel about him, which is pretty good. He, is the number 1 guy there. May not have Josh Downs. I think for the most part, Pittman is a good start.
It's always kind of a solid start. This Patriots defense, this version of it doesn't scare me. I think Pittman's pretty much a solid set and forget at wide receiver too. And that's especially the case if Josh Downs with that knee injury doesn't play. Let's talk about Downs. Left early. If he gives it a go again, can you trust him?
No. After what happened last week, if he tries to play through it again, no way. Not starting him.
Yeah, way too much risk. You don't want exactly what happened. The guy is active, he plays, and gives you nothing. So just sit him. And the number 1 receiver in New England, I guess, is still Demario Douglas. Did okay last week. Can he do okay this week?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about him. He can do okay. If you need him, you can start him.
Floor play in PPR, get you a few points. It's not even as good a matchup as last week. So if you need something because of buys or injuries, sure. And I guess we have to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, who should be the number 1 guy, but I guess he did a little something last week.
Yeah, he somehow had the most yards of any of the receivers here, but it can't feel good about Juju not starting them.
No, I mean, I really don't want to start a Patriots receiver. If I did, it would still be Douglas. Juju, I'm still just going to ignore. Browns taking on the Ravens. Deshaun Watson is back. Amari Cooper has been solid. How do you feel about him in this matchup, though?
I mean, I said last week I'm done doubting him. He came through. No reason to doubt him now, even in a tough matchup. Good start this week.
Same here. I mean, not because I feel like Watson is what he used to be or so great, but Amari Cooper is just, he's that good. We've seen what he can do, make big plays, score touchdowns. And I will say this, even though on the road in Baltimore, not the best matchup for him. Look, you're going to look at what he did the last time these two teams played in week 4. He only caught one pass for 16 yards. You think maybe Cooper has a down week. That week, when they played, you have to remember the quarterback for Cleveland was Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It wasn't even the backup PJ Walker. So you're going to have to throw that game out the window. Amari Cooper has been really good most of the season. And I'll tell you what, I feel not only good about starting him, but I feel really good about his early line on underdog. If you look at the pick'ems, go higher than 56.5 yards. I will take that. He's gone over that mark 5 of 8 games this season. And again, those 8 games, that includes a couple with the backup PJ Walker and one with a rookie who didn't do anything. So I really like Cooper this week, and I'm definitely taking his pick on underdog going higher than 56.5 yards. Combine that with that Bryce Young pick, that's a good chance to win. Now, I don't think there's any other Cleveland receivers worth talking about at this point, and I think really the only Baltimore receiver worth mentioning for fantasy is Zay Flowers. But, I mean, after the last 2 weeks, is he even worth considering?
No, I kind of liked him last week. Did not come through. Not a great matchup. I cannot start Zay Flowers, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't feel it last week, and now he gets to play the number 1 defense in the league. I can't do it. Flowers, I'm not dropping him just yet, but he's on my bench. All right, next up we got the Texans at the Bengals. Be a lot of receivers to talk about here. Let's start with Nico Collins, who is still, I think, the number 1 receiver there in Houston. Although he was, 4th in receiving last week. How do you feel about Collins now?
Yeah, I feel like Collins kind of just is what he is. He's one of these guys. He's startable every week. He's got upside, but he's not a guy you feel like fantastic about necessarily. But I still think, this matchup, it could be high scoring. It could be a shootout. I still think he's startable.
I will say I don't feel nearly as good about Nico this week. Last week I thought he would go off. Instead, it was 2 other Texans receivers that went off. Collins was still good. He still scored, got some yardage. He was just a little bit overshadowed. But that was at home. Nico on the road is like a different guy. And to some extent, Stroud has been a little bit. So I think Collins is more just like a flex option for me. Now, what about Tank Dell? Of course, we saw the huge game. The touchdown at the end, 2 touchdowns in that game. Is Tank now a guy you just kind of have to throw in your lineup?
I don't think so. I mean, we saw him do this, a while back, and then he had some down games. So, look, he's definitely got the upside. So I'll look at him as, a guy you can start, a flex type of guy you can start with upside, but understand there's also risk.
Yeah, it's not quite as favorable a spot here. I mean, look, if you're looking for a flex play, he's the type of guy you want because you can always have a big game, big play. So I'd say a solid flex. And then the leading receiver last week was Noah Brown. I mean, this was his first big game of the year, but remember, he missed 4 due to injury. He's going to be a popular pickup. Is he a guy you can stream?
I hate chasing these random big games. I know he was kind of coming on, but I'm personally not starting Noah Brown this week unless I'm desperate.
I mean, I'm still putting him 3rd among Texans receivers, and I'm not feeling as good about Texans receivers as I did last week. I think he's an option in deeper leagues. And then probably a good option in any league. T. Higgins led the team in receiving last week. Is he pretty much a must start?
Yeah, you got to be feeling good about T. Higgins, or at least you should be feeling good about T. Higgins. Joe Burrow looks great. Chase a little banged up. You got to start T. Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, if I got Higgins, he's in my lineup. 49ers going to take on the Jaguars. We'll see if this is a high-scoring game, as many will expect. Let's start with Brandon Aiyuk. Thoughts?
I like Brandon Aiyuk a lot this week. Coming out of the bye, I'm going to trust that Kyle Shanahan gets this offense righted, gets his ship righted. Jaguars are a pass funnel defense, great against the run, terrible against the pass. Give me Brandon Aiyuk everywhere this week.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you were starting Brandon Aiyuk on a weekly basis. In this matchup, there's really no reason not to. So, very good start. And then hopefully we see the return of Deebo Samuel. Signs right now pointing to him playing. If he plays, do you roll with him?
I think you have to, for all the reasons I just said. Good matchup, good offense. Got to feel like they're going to get this figured out. I think Deebo also a solid start.
I mean, you got to hope after a week off and, missing a couple games, he's good to go. So if he's good and no, big question marks after the injury reports come out Friday, then I say put him in your lineup if you got him. Now, on the other hand, also coming off a bye, Jaguars, we got Calvin Ridley. Do we feel better about him after his previous game?
I don't know. I mean, because he's so up and down this year. This matchup doesn't scare me, though. I mean, they did bolster the defense, but they bolstered the pass rush. Secondary is still a weakness for this team, giving up a lot to wide receivers. Certainly, Calvin Ridley not a guy you have to start, but I think you can start him.
Always going to be volatile. I mean, risky, but maybe worth it. So just kind of that wide receiver 3 range for me. And then what about Christian Kirk?
Yeah, I still like him. I know he didn't have like the biggest of games before the bye, but he's been great most weeks. Again, this secondary doesn't scare me. Christian Kirk to me is a good start.
Look, if there's any player I feel pretty confident about in this matchup against the Niners defense, it is Christian Kirk. He's been consistent. I think he's the guy who's going to be the go-to here, so I really like Christian Kirk. I'm starting him. Saints going to take on the Vikings. Let's talk about Chris Olave. Seems like a good spot for him, so how confident are you in a big game?
I mean, you can never be super confident with him right now in this offense, but I mean, he scored. He should have scored the week before. He's a great player. It's a great matchup. I'm starting Chris Olave.
Yeah, I don't think we can ignore the fact that going to Minnesota, which, I mean, it hasn't been so much score fest with this team because their offense is different there without Kirk Cousins, but it's a good spot. I like Olave. I think he's going to continue to produce. I'm starting Olave for the most part. And then there's boom bust Rashid Shaheed. Which way does he go this week?
Who knows? I mean, you really never know. He doesn't play a lot of snaps. He doesn't get a lot of targets. But one of those targets could be a huge touchdown, or a couple of them could be, or he could do nothing like he did last week. You want to put him in your lineup and risk the upside, go for it. Risky flex.
That's it. We really don't ever know. I mean, if you need a flex with upside, you could go Shaheed. Just be prepared for the possible 0. And then there's Michael Thomas. Does he even have upside?
No, he's like a risky start without upside. Like, why even bother? No chance.
No, I'm still not starting Michael Thomas anywhere. Now, Jordan Addison, interesting because Josh Dobbs, now the quarterback for sure, rest of the season. What do we do with Addison in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, he was okay last week. We know Dobbs is at least serviceable, but this is a tough spot. Marshawn Lattimore's been playing great this year. I can only put Addison in the start him if you need him category this week.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's kind of where he's going to dwell here. Maybe like a low-end wide receiver 3 or flex, depending on your league. So startable, but the upside is just not there anymore. Packers going to take on the Steelers in Pittsburgh. So we had to talk about Christian Watson. Banged up with apparently 3 different types of injuries last week, which is adding injury on to insult the fact that he again did nothing for fantasy. Can we even consider Watson as a lineup possibility?
No. You know what? Remember like last year and the year before, we would talk about all the random Chiefs wide receivers. I guess it was last year because Tyreek Hill was there, and I would just hard pass on all of them. That's where I'm at with the Packers. Hard pass on Christian Watson.
There's nothing that's going to make me start Christian Watson this week. Does that make Romeo Doubs in any way more interesting?
Hard pass. You need a touchdown for the floor. Like he's touchdown or nothing. Like hard pass.
This offense just showed, even against the Rams with hardly any semblance of an offense and all these opportunities, nah, Dobbs is just like a desperation flex. And I'm guessing the same goes for Jaden Reed.
Yep, very hard pass.
Yeah, gonna agree there too. Now, on the Pittsburgh side, actually looking a little more promising, Deontay Johnson has been great the last couple of weeks. Does he keep it going?
I think so. Why not? He's getting the targets. He looks good. This Packers secondary has not been very good. The whole defense hasn't been good. Very good start this week.
Yes, agreed. Deontay has been clearly the number 1 target since coming back from injury. Very solid start. George Pickens has not been solid the last couple weeks since Deontay came back. Is he a guy we consider benching?
I don't know about that, but I don't put him in the boom bust range quite like a Rashid Shaheed type. I mean, at least he gets more opportunity, but he's very volatile. He's back to running a lot of go routes, not a lot of routes over the middle. A flex with upside.
There you go. Until we see a bigger target share with Deontay on the field at the same time, that's it. Just a risky play. Tennessee's traveling to Tampa Bay. That means we get to talk about DeAndre Hopkins and figure out what is he going to do this week with Will Levis as his quarterback.
Yeah, who knows? I doubt we're going to see the DeAndre Hopkins we saw the first time with Will Levis. Will we see a better one than last week? Maybe. It's not a terrible matchup. I think he's still startable.
Look, he's still getting a lot of targets. He's getting deep shots, which I like to see that Tennessee's actually throwing it, down the field. Tampa Bay just got eviscerated through the air by C.J. Stroud in Houston. I feel at least Levis could do something and Hopkins could benefit, so I think he's a pretty solid start. And for the Tampa Bay side, let's start with Mike Evans.
Yeah, I mean, he's been scoring touchdowns, but hasn't been doing a lot outside of that. But it is a good matchup against the Titans, so I think he's still a solid start this week.
Definitely has settled down since his hot early start. But again, always has upside, always can make a big play like he did last week. Almost got in the end zone. He was inches away. So I think in this matchup, he's still pretty solid. And then Chris Godwin, I feel also a good matchup against Tennessee. I think Godwin could have a bounce back game.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be worse than last week. That was crazy, especially for how high scoring that game was. But I still like Godwin. It's a good matchup. Good start this week.
Falcons going to take on the Cardinals. Last week, no Drake London. If he comes back, are you willing to start him?
The only reason I'm going to say yes, even though he's wearing a Falcons uniform, is because I really like Drake London. So Drake London, you're a Falcon that gets a pass. I will start you.
I mean, it's always tough. But look, he has a lot of talent. He has a lot of upside. Sometimes it'll get used. Arizona, it's a good spot, so sure. Now, Hollywood Brown gets a lot more interesting because he's got his quarterback Kyler Murray back. So how high can you be on Hollywood?
I'm not ready to go, all in on Hollywood first game back with Kyler, but you got to feel a lot better than, definitely a lot better than Clayton Tune. That's for sure. That was a disaster. So I'm going to put Hollywood, kind of in that flex with upside.
Yeah, we don't want to get too carried away. And, for everything we say about Atlanta, their defense hasn't been terrible, despite the way they looked in the second half of last week. But also, they have a good corner, and A.J. Terrell has been one of the best this year. I think Hollywood is startable, but again, just acknowledge there's not a high ceiling this week. Now, what about Michael Wilson? Do you think he benefits from the quarterback switch?
I mean, maybe, but not putting him in my lineup. Too risky.
Yeah, you're getting really deep here. Again, there's other guys. I know a lot of good wide receivers are on bye. I think you can find some safer upside elsewhere. And I'm assuming the same goes for Rondell Moore.
Yeah, just no upside here. Not starting him.
Nah, I can't start Rondell Moore. We got the Lions taking on the Chargers. You know you're good with the Sun God. What about Jameson Williams? Is he going to show up in this matchup?
I mean, it's a great matchup, but what are we really expecting from Jameson Williams at this point? I mean, he's like Rashid Shaheed to me, right? Like all or nothing. You want to put him in your lineup and chance it, go for it, but you run the risk of a zero.
I mean, even with him, all or nothing, all is like maybe one catch that happens to go for a touchdown. I'm not in on Jameson Williams. I don't know what it'll take for me to be in on Jameson Williams, but I'm not starting him anywhere. And then kind of similar guy here on the other side. A lot of talent, but it just hasn't come through yet. Quentin Johnston. Do you think the absence of Josh Palmer means he becomes viable?
Yeah, I wish he got a better matchup, right? 2 tough matchups in a row. I still think he's worth stashing to see what he does here in these games without Josh Palmer, but not feeling good enough to start him this week.
Same thing. Maybe he goes for a random long score, but maybe I'm not going to risk finding out. Giants going to take on the Cowboys. Looks like it's Tommy DeVito, the third-string quarterback in. I guess we can talk about Wan'Dale Robinson because he did score last week with DeVito behind center. So is Robinson a streaming candidate?
Not for me. I mean, yeah, he scored, but what else? What else are you getting here? No chance I'm starting any Giants wide receiver.
No, I mean, look, this is desperation. You're basically just hoping for garbage time touchdowns here, which is what happened last week with Robinson. It could be a random score to like Darius Slayton or Jalen Hyatt, and it doesn't matter. You can't start a Giants receiver. Now on the Dallas side, let's talk Brandon Cooks. Didn't follow up with a good game in Week 9. Is he still on the radar just because it's the Giants?
Did he even catch a pass last week? I mean, what a letdown. I finally came around on Brandon Cooks, and this is what I got. Nope, not starting him.
Yeah, I think now it's time to kind of just wave the white flag here. He just doesn't look like the same player. I think he's cooked. Jalen Tolbert was getting targets late. Nah, Cooks, I think he's droppable. And then what about Michael Gallup? He's also a guy that just isn't showing up.
Yep, not showing up. Not showing up in my fantasy lineups. No way.
Even the matchup, look, don't read too much into the fact they're playing the Giants. He's not involved enough. Can't start Gallup. Commanders going to take on the Seahawks in Seattle. Look, Washington's passing game has been pretty prolific lately. So, what does this mean for Terry McLaurin this week?
Pretty much the same it means every week for me. I feel good about him, not great about him, but I think he's a solid start.
Yeah, that's the problem is this offense is spreading it around to so many different guys. McLaurin is technically the number one, but on a given week he might not be. So solid, but not a guy with a huge upside. And then there's Jahan Dotson. I mean, look, if you played him last week after picking him up, he paid off for you. Do you think he pays off again?
He could. I mean, he could do what he does, right? He can score a touchdown. He can make some plays. He's a bit riskier than Terry McLaurin for sure, but he's startable.
I mean, I'm not ready to say he's on his way to taking over as the lead receiver in Washington, although I wouldn't be shocked, but he's definitely riskier than Terry, so I'd say still a upside flex option. And then Jamison Crowder still involved while Curtis Samuel is out. Is Crowder someone that you could stream?
Nah, you got to be desperate. I actually did start him last week. I was desperate. He was decent. I mean, he didn't give me a 0, but just not a lot of upside here. No.
Yeah, this is too deep for me. I'm not going to go with Crowder. On the Seattle side, you know what we got? Start with DK Metcalf.
Yeah, what do we get with DK Metcalf? I mean, it's a great matchup. He should have a big game, but one catch last week? I mean, I guess in a good matchup, you're probably still starting him, but I don't feel great.
Yeah, he had that 50-yard play, and you thought, oh, he on his way to a big game, and then that's all he did. But, I mean, look, Washington, that secondary has been bad. I still feel like he's a strong start. I mean, I feel like he's got to get better. And then there's Tyler Lockett, still kind of boom bust. Which way does he go? Does he take advantage of this matchup?
I mean, he could. It's definitely a better matchup. He actually did lead the team in targets, so yeah, still startable this week.
Yeah, it's hard to bench him because of the Washington secondary, but again, just acknowledge that there is risk here. So startable, but not safe. But then what about Jackson Smith and Jigba? Is he taking over as the number one guy here?
I don't know if I'm ready to go that far, but he did lead this team in first read target share, and he was 5th among all wide receivers in first read target share. That's pretty crazy. I think eventually he is going to take over as the number one. For this week, I'm going to keep him in the kind of like flex, start him if you need him category.
Well, I'm usually fairly conservative with rookies and, making leaps of faith here. I'm ready to go there because of all that you said. He's getting the first read targets. Last week, he had more receptions than both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett combined. I think he's the number one guy now going forward. I think that's why they got him. And this matchup, I feel like I definitely want Jason in my lineups this week. Then on Sunday night, we're treated to the Jets at the Raiders. Let's start with Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, what a letdown. In a smash spot. Now he gets another good spot, but you know what? I don't care. He's got Zach Wilson. I mean, he's startable, but that's as high as I can go.
I mean, he didn't give you nothing on Monday night, but obviously not a huge game here. He's still startable. He's a guy that's going to be unpredictable, risky, but worth it if you need help. And then Devontae Adams. I mean, we could go on about this situation, but in a nutshell, how do you feel about him week 10?
Can't feel great. Going to get the sauce treatment. Aiden O'Connell, just no upside here. I can only put him in the same thing. Like, he's startable.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm ready to say I'm not giving up on Devontae Adams. I think he can come back. But now he gets Sauce Gardner in this matchup. Again, I'm kind of putting him in the flex category. Now, do you think Jacoby Myers is any better?
No. I mean, he had a better fantasy game because he scored a rushing touchdown, but he only had 2 catches outside of that. In this matchup, not starting Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, Myers. I mean, you can... I don't want to go too deep on the waiver wire or anything like that to replace Myers, but I don't really want to start him. On Monday night, we get the Broncos at the Bills. Do you want to start Jerry Jeudy?
No, I never want to start Jerry Jeudy. I mean, he had an okay game before the bye, like an explosion by Jerry Jeudy standards, but yeah, not. If you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, no, I don't want to start him. I mean, again, there are worse options, but I would look around first. What about Cortland Sutton? I mean, if nothing else, he's getting touchdowns. He's got 6 already on the season.
Yeah, he's getting touchdowns. He does some things outside of that. I mean, again, I'm not super excited about him. Again, I'm going to put him in that start him if you need him category.
I mean, if there's a player in this matchup I kind of like, it is Sutton. Just know that the yardage upside isn't there. Hasn't gone for 100 yards yet this season. Denver plays so slow, so prefer in a standard league, but he's still startable in PPR too. And then there's good old Gabe. Gabe Davis, of course, gave you nothing last week, and I mean absolutely nothing a week after getting you 12 targets and 6 catches. So what does Gabe do this week?
Gabe does what Gabe always does. Everybody got all excited. Oh, his role changed. His role randomly changed. No, his role didn't randomly change. It was just a random outlier game. Look, 3 points 3 weeks ago, a point the week before, then the explosion, then 0. You want to chance it, go for it, but just understand the risk.
There you go. It's going to be all or nothing. Hey, it's Denver. Maybe he does go off, but you know what? I will say this. I feel like it could be a Gabe week, but again, only if you're willing to put that risk in there. And then Khalil Shakir, well, he continues to be involved. Does that continue, and is it enough?
Yeah, he was involved, but I mean, Dalton Kincaid getting peppered with targets. Obviously, there's Stephon Diggs. Not enough here for me. I'm not starting him.
No, I mean, you could stream him if you're desperate, but that's about it. That's our take on all the wide receivers that matter for Week 10 of the fantasy season. We got you covered for everything you need to help win this week. Check out our Week 10 playlist right here.